We just started a new year, so everyone's focused on setting goals and evaluating what you want to go after this year. We're reflecting on the new habits and routines that we want to follow in the new year. But routines are a tricky thing. I've been on both sides. Flying by the seat of my pants, ignoring all routine and going fully off vibes. This much freedom makes me feel scattered and unable to follow through on anything in the long term. Even when I feel like I'm removing all routine because it makes things more chill for myself, it ends up being even more discouraging because I don't actually end up getting anything done consistently. Or on the other side, forcing myself to strictly follow a really rigid routine and going overboard and time blocking every single minute in my Google Calendar. No matter how much short-term productivity this gives me, I always end up inevitably falling off the wagon and resenting structure altogether. Number one is blind commitment. Just because you made the decision to be committed to this goal at one point in time, you feel like you have to continue to be committed, regardless of whether or not it's actually necessary anymore or whether it actually holds value for you. Number two is being too black and white or all or nothing. When you fall off the wagon one day, it feels pointless to get back on the next day. This ignores the cumulative impact of routines and disincentivizes you from getting as many wins as you can, even if you can't get them all in a row. Number three is just pushing yourself too hard. I've done this so many times where I push my mind and my body way too hard just for the sake of the routine. The last one is just focusing on too many things at once. If you try to establish 10 high effort, new, unrelated things, you're going to eventually burn out. And this is probably going to make you give up eventually and not continue with the routine. It's essentially setting you up to fail in the end. So how do you find the balance where you're able to establish the new routines and habits you want without inevitably crashing into that wall? This is where I love to lean into the idea of soft structures when it comes to routines and habits. So let's talk about soft structures, what they are, and why they work for some people. Soft structures help you see productivity as more of the journey rather than the destination. Instead of thinking of productivity as something that is so rigid and prescriptive, soft structures help you see it as setting more flexible guidelines to help you reach your goals without making yourself feel confined. To me, the easiest way for me to think of this is the fact that it is outcome-based or output-based instead of input-based. So basically, you're focusing on getting yourself to your end goals versus checking the boxes along the way. This lack of rigidity leaves a lot more mental and physical space for spontaneity, creative problem solving, and sometimes just being a tired human being. This really goes a long way to reduce guilt about not being 100% productive every single step along the way. And that lack of guilt is something that's really, really helpful to maintaining habits in the long term. This all sounds very abstract though, so let me go into how I actually implement these soft structures in my life to help myself be more productive and actually achieve the goals, habits, and routines that I want. Daily goals will inevitably get stressful eventually and can feel really discouraging if you end up missing a day or a handful of days. Bucket goals, by contrast, so for example, instead of saying that you want to try to do something every day as much as possible, saying that you want to try to do something 15 times a month, can end up being a lot more sustainable and feel a lot better mentally. It's all about flexibility. Instead of treating it like a competition with yourself to check off as many of these boxes as possible, putting an upper limit of so for a month it would be 30 days trying to check it off 15 days instead is just a lot more attainable. This requires you to be really realistic with what you anticipate actually being able to sustain. Sure, you can set a goal of trying to work out 30 days a month, but for most people, unless that's your only thing that you're focusing on, you're going to miss a day or two, if not many. I like to think of what I think is possible for me at this current moment and then just adding a little bit. So if I think that it's possible for me to, let's say, work out 3 times a week, that would be 12 times a month. Maybe I'd bump it up to 15 or 16 so I can just push myself a little bit to still have to work a little bit harder to reach that goal. The good thing about tracking over a long term, so this could be on a monthly basis or quarterly or even a yearly, depending on what these goals are, the ebbs and flows in your productivity will probably balance out over time. So if you have a week where you're really busy and you're not able to perform all of these routines and habits that you're setting out to, it'll probably be balanced out by some other weeks where you are really productive. This requires a little bit of kind of testing with yourself. If initially you set quarterly goals, then you end up realizing towards the end of the quarter that you're shuffling to make up all that lost time, maybe shorten the time frame just a little bit. So doing it on a monthly or a weekly basis. But even those small extensions of the time frame that you're tracking those habits and not attempting to try to do it every single day will make a big difference from daily habit tracking. So many people feel the need to be a morning person. They think that that is the key to productivity and the key to a grown-up life. But do you need to be? If you're a night person, why not just lean into it? That could be what's standing in your way of actually seeing the goals that you want to achieve come to fruition. This tip isn't just for night people though. This is just generally aligning when you try to do certain tasks with when your energy is best for it. The first step here would be getting familiar with what your energy patterns are like. You may be innately attuned to this and you just know that you have certain times during the day that you're ready to just do more hard focus work or just hard work in general. But if you're not naturally in tune with this, I would recommend probably spending a week or two and just checking in with yourself throughout certain points during the day and tracking what your energy is like and what kind of tasks you feel up to achieving then. Once you're clear on these optimal times for peak productivity, align your hardest tasks with those times. These high effort tasks could be, they vary for everyone, but it could be things like working out. It could be things like planning a video, writing. For some people, it would be cooking or meal prepping. Whatever requires the most mental energy for you and is easiest for you to put off, those are the kind of things you want to do when you feel most mentally clear. The key here is to try to fit it in, not when you feel like you should do it, but when you actually feel like you have the energy to do these tasks. Another key part of the soft structure of it all is making sure that you can adapt in the moment to how you're actually feeling right now. You could do all of this energy mapping and plan to do certain tasks during these certain times, but if you actually get to the moment where you plan to do something and you're feeling like shit, let's say you're planning to wake up early to work out, because you know that you are best just getting it out of the way in the morning and you got terrible sleep the night before, you can try to push through that workout when you're really, really tired and probably end up making yourself more tired throughout the rest of the day. Or you can just shift it to a different time during that day when you're not feeling as tired. This also applies to the other side though. If you are feeling this unexpected burst of energy and you don't have anything planned during that time, you had planned for that to be downtime or to do something a little bit more like easier and logistical, then pull up some of that high effort task to complement that energy burst that you're feeling right then. This is a semi-related point, so we'll consider this tip 2.5. And this is to anchor tasks to key moments or habits instead of rigid time slots. No matter how much I want time blocking to work for me, and no matter how much I try, it just never will work for me. And I always feel annoyed when it comes up and my calendar tells me, okay, it's time to work on this thing right now. It feels like a nagging parent that I want to ignore. If you're like me, then you know sometimes it's important to know generally throughout the day when you're doing something, but setting an actual set time for it can be really stressful. So instead you can set broad times of the day that you're gonna work on it. So for example, first thing in the morning, or before you do this, or in the afternoon, or in the evening, or you can anchor it with other key points. So for example, if you know that meal prepping is something you want to do, but it's something you struggle with, pair it with whenever you get home from grocery shopping, you automatically meal prep right after you put away the other groceries. Or you could do like checking your emails whenever you go on your morning walk. This allows for some amount of structure and guidance while still allowing your life to happen outside of these time blocks. I have realized the importance of focusing on smaller sets of grouped habits. You cannot conquer the world in a single quarter or even a single year. And I feel like I have to remind myself about this every single year when I'm going through and I'm setting my goals for the year ahead. I always lay out a million different things that I want to do, and they could be across the board anywhere from my career to money, to health and fitness, to relationships with people in my life. And I go deep in every single different direction. But having this scattered set of goals is not setting you up for success. If you end up with a list of 20 different habits that you have to do every single day, or that you want to do every single day, you're not gonna succeed, at least not for very long. I would like to see someone who can actually complete all of these habits every single day for a year and either not be miserable or do those habits well. So it's better to focus on grouped habits that are focused on one or a handful of bigger picture goals. This is more attainable, and it helps you get a lot more momentum between all these different tasks. This is the whole premise of the book Essentialism, which I've been reading and I would highly recommend. So I'm gonna read this quote from them that I think sums this up perfectly. The way of the essentialist rejects the idea that we can fit it all in. And it really points out the value of putting more into less. You can see in this diagram here from the book that if you have 20 different things that you're focusing on, you're gonna have a set amount of energy and it'll get split between all of those. But if you have one thing or just a small amount of things that you're focusing on, that energy goes a lot farther. Synergy is on your side here. Take clean eating, for example. If you are trying to set a goal of eating healthier, it's going to be a lot easier to eat healthier when you're also going to the gym at the same time. It's also going to be easier to sleep better because your body is craving it after those workouts and after eating well, so you don't have all this sugar running through your body. These are some perfect candidates for a grouped goal, a group big picture goal of living a healthier life. Think of the alternative of stacking up all of these different goals that are unrelated on top of each other. So let's say that you want to post every week on YouTube, and you want to get 8 hours of sleep, and you want to work out every day, and you want to read 50 books, and you want to, and the list goes on and on and on. It's too much. I like to have seasons of focus, and whether that season is a whole year or if it's the first half of the year or a quarter, where I can really drill down into what's the priority for me at that moment. And then after you have worked to create something as more of a second nature habit, it's a lot easier to not have that as a goal of something you track. That's just something you innately do now. And then you can end up adding some things on it in a different season of focus. Habits, goal setting, and productivity is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. It requires continuous recommitment and reevaluation. You need to check in every once in a while to see if you even still feel connected to that goal. Sometimes our values change, our lives change, anything else happening in the world can change, and it can lead you to not really care about or even value a goal that you were really, really focusing on before. If that's the case, it's okay and actually a lot more productive to abandon that goal altogether and free up some space for something else that's actually meaningful to you in that moment. You might also find that the goal is no longer serving you in that moment. So let's say that you have been really, really consistent with creating these habits that you wanted or achieving something that you wanted to do to get to something else. So let's say that you wanted to, I don't know, read 50 books to help you become a better writer, and you find that taking so much time reading is actually stealing away time from the time that you need to write. There's a million different examples of this, but usually these habits and goals are to get you to something else, and evaluate after a certain period of time if it's actually getting you there. You also should evaluate if you maybe can dial it back a little bit. Let's say that you created this certain habit of, let's say like posting on YouTube, and you wanted to post on YouTube 2 times a week or something. And you find that the weeks that you accidentally have only posted once or only had the time to post once instead of twice, you end up getting the same results. So you can adjust your goal to say like, hey, I don't need to push myself unnecessarily because I'm able to get the results I want without that. The whole point of setting goals is hopefully to eventually achieve those goals in the end. So these evaluation periods, whether you do it monthly, quarterly, bi-yearly, yearly, can help you keep things in perspective and to hopefully make sure that all of this effort that you're putting into these goals and your productivity is actually paying off in the end. Remember my little caveat earlier? For some people. Here's where I'm going to address it. I will say that in order for soft structures to actually work, you have to have a good bit of discipline innately. If you feel like you're someone who needs to be forced into a strict habit to actually get something done, this approach might not work for you. But if you're like me and you actually feel some eventual resentment towards really, really strict goals, this video was for you. The secret here is that since it is semi-flexible, there's enough structure there to kind of hold me accountable, but it's loose enough where I feel like I'm given the opportunity to constantly make the decision to work towards my goals rather than something else forcing me to do that, even if that something else is the systems that I put in place myself. This ownership of these habits and feeling like I have to put in a little bit of work every day to do these is what helps me to really follow through on these goals for the long term. So if you feel like you have a little bit of this rebellion inside of you too, soft structures may be what you've been looking for, and on your deep dive into productivity where everything seems so rigid, this might be the missing link. Happy New Year. I hope you achieve all of the goals and habits that you want to achieve this year.